So it seems to me, based on your answer, that no matter what you think the ERP situation is, between the plants that you have versus the plants that you're buying, there is always some kind of IT transition team necessary in order to get everything working. So
Correct.
it's not necessarily a question of, oh, well, you have to upgrade, or oh, you have to transition to something else. It's just the simple fact that to get things working smoothly, like you said before, even if you have two SAP products, they don't necessarily speak to each other well.
That's correct. And mind you, also ERP, if you look at the transition checklist, the ERP is just one line. You have a checklist that will include the security software, telecom. Are you on, AT&T versus XYZ telco company? What kind of Wi-Fi do you have? So the checklist of things that needs to be potentially integrated is several pages long. So an ERP, if you look at that very long list, ERP is just one line out of that long checklist. It's a big item, mind you. This is one that's, more costly, more complex, and it will take more time versus trying to put everybody on the same email or cloud. But globally, we're talking about a checklist that has a few pages long. But again, this is ERP being a big item.
So just to try to maybe come up with ways that managers can rethink this whole transition model, how much money in the end, like in terms of ratios, would someone save if they did a transition as opposed to waiting and then eventually setting it up, for instance?
Well, it's really hard to put a number, even a ratio, because it depends on so many factors that I think it would be misleading to say that it should cost between X and Y. There's too many variables on this, and this is indirectly. It's a little bit as well why in some case corporation just decide to wait before they integrate anything. They take a path where they just decide to run the company they just purchased as is for a while. They want to see it running, observe how they work. They don't jump too quickly because it's costly and it's relatively complex. So to your question, what is the ratio? How much should it cost, or how much will it? I think it depends on too many factors to put a number on that.
Yeah, and like you said before, it's ERP is just one part of the whole day one roadmap process that just goes on and on with legal licensing. Like you say, even the minutia when it comes to what Wi-Fi or what phone companies they have. It's like clearly during the merger, there's a lot to pack into when you just bought a company.
Correct. And just to give you an example, you might the company you're buying, they might have signed a contract for 5 years or X number of years with a provider, whatever, if it's SAP or Amazon or whatever. You may have signed an agreement for 3, 4, 5 years engagement, and suddenly your company is being acquired and you don't need those licenses anymore because you're going to be using another product because the buyer is using a different platform. Suddenly you have in front of you a 3-year contract, and there's only 1 year, there might be 2 years left in your contract, but so and this is just a legal aspect of licensing. And then you have, Microsoft and every software that the company might have purchased over the years. So it's a long list of to-dos. It's not necessarily complex. If you look at the complexity of it, each one is not complex. I think with the complexity comes is with the volume and the amount of detail that you will have to go through in a short period of time.
Do you have any thoughts for regarding D4M and its place in the M&A process, in the IT process, things for directors and VPs to keep in mind when purchasing a plant?
Well, I think in terms of advice, you mean in terms of advice or suggestion on do's and don'ts, I think one thing to obviously to keep in mind for a corporation going through this, obviously we can assist them in many, many ways. It cannot be, just A or B. We could be there during the due diligence only. We couldn't just be part of the transition and so on. So it's not a one size fits all. And my advice, if I take I would say more the perspective of our clients, is I think if you look at integration, when you look at it, if you find out that to integrate something this year or a short period of time after the acquisition, if it costs, let's say, $1 million to do it this year, right after the acquisition, if you park it for a while and you wait 2 years, 3 years, it's not going to get cheaper. I think the simple observation, if it's $1 million or X dollar now to integrate and you delay it for a year, 2 year, 3 years, one thing is sure, it will not be cheaper later because there will be more application, more data. We haven't talked in the last hour about the data, but there's obviously the whole ball of wax around the data. What do you do with the data? How long do you need to archive the data? Who owns the data? In front of the auditors, in front of the authority like the IRS. So, but that's another topic. So, back to my point, I mean, whatever you don't integrate immediately, one thing is sure, it's not going to be cheaper in 3 years. And I think that may be sometimes a mistake that is being done. It seems simpler and to postpone, but you get into a situation where companies sometimes grows very fast. You go through one acquisition and you hardly have time to catch up your breath, and you move on with another acquisition. So at the end of the day, you could end up 5 years down the road running, a bunch of ERPs, several ERPs, because you have been acquiring company here and there, and you didn't take the time to integrate any of them. So you end up at the end of the time period where you have many, many ERPs and none of them have been integrated. This is a scenario that happened very often. I mean, it's common situation in the industry in general.